guys, welcome to The Writer's Journey. I'm your host, Lauren Moore, and with me is Kayleen Williams and our special guest tonight, Joe Solari. Ooh, I messed up your name already. How about you say your name?
Joe Solari.
Yes. Yeah, we just started. We've been talking about business practices for authors and freelancers. Kayleen and I, we are both authors and freelancers, and Joe with us, are you a freelancer too? You're definitely an author.
Yes. Well, I have my own business, so I don't think myself necessarily as a freelancer. But I am an entrepreneur for sure. I've always been that.
And we will definitely be talking about the difference between like a single freelancer like me and then having a business. We'll be talking about LLCs and whether authors should be setting them up or not. We'll be talking about all of that. But first, a little bit about Joe. Joe has written 2 really excellent books for every indie author out there, or any business owner. The first one is Business Owner's Compendium, a practical guide to the theory of starting, owning, and operating a business, and Direct Sales Unleashed, why your fans want to buy direct and how to do it. So we'll be talking about both those books and how indie authors and others can be using those ideas and applying them to their businesses to further themselves and their business today. Yeah. So first question is, how are you guys doing? How's life? Kayleen?
Life is good. I am pretty much doing the same stuff I was doing last week. I just also have to say, I don't know how I've lived without some form of the Microsoft Office in my life. Freaking, I have like the Stargazer. It has like that new, new software smell. It's really good. I like it.
Yes. Now you've got it and it's working great. That's wonderful.
It is. It's fantastic.
And Joe, how have things been going with you?
Good, busy. I just was at the Sell More Books Summit in Chicago, and before that I was at Archer's Rest. So, 2 different events for authors, different kind of venues and levels of success. And, just helping authors. I'm always writing something and working with authors. We've got some just projects that are keeping us, very busy. Yes.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about your business and your work with indie authors? And I don't know if you work with hybrid or traditional authors as well, but how does your business help the author community?
Sure. So there's a couple different ways that I work with authors, and it all really came out of, I wrote that first book, The Business Owner's Compendium, and authors started to pick it up and read it and ask me for help. And I got involved with speaking at the 20 Books conference. And I came out of that, really, my mind was blown. I had experience with self-publishing because I had done it myself, and my wife had self-published, but I had no idea of like what was really going on with content creation until I was at that first show. And when I came away from that, I realized that I had this unique set of skills, and I needed to figure out some ways to help everybody that's in the community. So it was real easy for the higher end folks because they just came up to me and said, hey, listen, I've got all these business problems, come solve them for me. And they have the money, right? Like if you've got money, you can solve problems. Right? So in that case, it's amazing how that works, right? It can fix your roof. It can make your water heater get fixed faster. But in that case, what they were looking for was somebody to help with the back office. So what I do with my partner, Lisa Gardina, who's a CPA, is we take over authors' back offices and we create a financial plan for them based on what they're trying to do with their life and their business. And then we do the accounting and the books and hold them to this financial model and act as their financial team, as them being the CEO. And basically, here's the numbers, here's what we see is going on, what should we do? And we do that on a monthly basis, right? And the folks that are in that program are making $200,000 or more a year. So a lot of people are like, wow, we're not trying to be elitist. It's just based on what we have to do. It's expensive. But I think the big takeaway for everybody should be is like, we've got clients. Like these are people just like you that have worked their way up. and now need that kind of help. But then what about everybody else? Well, that's something that I do this kind of stuff where I get on shows and I talk to people and answer their questions, because I believe that anybody that applies these tools to their business and thinks of writing as a business has just as much opportunity to become one of my big boy clients as anybody else. And I really want to make sure that you learn these things sooner, because if you don't apply certain principles to any business, it's going to really cause you pain, and maybe you may go out of business. So, did that answer the question?
Yeah, it definitely did. So you're someone who is able to look down the road for us authors and see where the pitfalls are and help us to avoid them, and also to come up with a plan for helping us to get where we want to get to in our writing career.
Yes, yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I think that the underlying premise to all of this is being in, and also part of your question, most of my clients are indie. There have been some that have been traditional in the past, but most of them are very focused on building their own business. That's not to say I wouldn't work with a hybrid or traditional client. I could help anybody's business. But the underlying thing to all of this is small business issues, right? Like, you can go to, I went to a really fancy business school in Chicago, and one of the best in the world, and they don't teach you the things you need to do to run a small business, right? They teach you how to go raise money. They teach you how to work in a big financial business. They teach you all kinds of, ways you can use financial engineering to do things. But understanding how a small business operates, especially when it's a business of one, there's not a lot of resources out there. Right? And what's weird about that is that when you look at the numbers, 64% of the businesses in the United States make less than $500,000 a year. Forget about whatever industry, right? So 64% of the businesses only make enough income to support like one person or one family, right? So when we hear about like the Fortune 500, that's like 0.1% of all the businesses in the United States, right? So a mass of businesses that are, employing people are small businesses. And understanding small business problems, they're very, very different than big company businesses. And then what we do is we kind of put a spin on it with the whole idea of being an author, right? There's some things that are fundamental to that just give it a little bit different flavor. So go. Where you want us to kind of go with this? We got so many different questions I'm sure people have that I could kind of address.
Great one.
Do you want to just jump into number 2, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So if there's a new writer out there hoping to publish for the first time this year, what are some basic business practices, like you were mentioning, that they should definitely consider and start implementing like right now?
Okay. So that's a great place for us to start, because like I said, small business, there's a lot of issues that are just small business issues. And I'll answer that question specifically about writers, but let's start with something a little higher level that talks about all businesses, because this is something that I think is real important for all business owners to understand. So the United States Census and the Small Business Administration have been, for I think it's over 100 years now, have been doing studies about the number of businesses that start and go out of business each year. They actually do it along with the census, so it's every 4 years, right? So they have solid data on this. And the data shows that it doesn't matter what kind of economic cycle we're in, what industry you're in, what size business you are, okay? None of those factors change your chance of going out of business, okay? Those numbers are almost immutable. So if you start a business this year, the chances that you're doing it in 5 years is a flip of a coin.
Wow.
Okay. 50-50 shot that you're still in business in 5 years. Now, why exactly do you go out of business? It might not be something bad, right? It could be somebody bought your business. It could be you decided to do something else, right? But the other thing we know is the number one reason by a long shot why most businesses fail, they run out of money. They just run out of cash. Okay? That you need to be successful business growing, right? Like you can outgrow your cash and fail, right? That's why a lot of startup businesses have to go to private equity to get money because they're growing too fast for the money that's coming in. So they need to get another source of cash to keep the engine going, right? So if we know that the number one reason is that most businesses go out of business is that they run out of cash, let's start with that principle and not do that. Let's be less dumb, right? Like let's not. Everyone's like, let's be. Oh, should we write a business plan? Should we no? Let's just be less dumb and focus on that one thing of not running out of cash. And I think that it starts right at the book launch level, right? I believe that, and this was now where we're getting into the author specific stuff. Every author that's getting started has a finite amount of working capital, right? There's only two sources they really have. It's their personal savings they're putting into business and their sweat equity, right? Like you're not paying yourself while you're writing the book. So that's limited. And you probably need the cash to do things like make covers, pay an editor, like stuff that's going to make a super good quality product. So even though I'm all about what a company structure is to protect yourself from liabilities, what I want you to be is a good CEO and steward of this business and say, listen, if I've got, let's say $1,000, that $1,000 should go into my book product quality rather than putting it into setting up a company. Because setting up a company isn't going to get your product into the market, right? And the first thing we got to know is, can you write a book and is there an audience that wants to read it?
The number one question.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and so, to kind of summarize that, the first thing you, as a starting author, you want to understand the capital that you have for this project, and you want to be very, very conservative in how you use it. Don't worry about what your ad spend is going to be. I mean, it really has to go into the product quality. Right? There's a concept that I talk about called the launch trough. This is the idea of, let's say you're planning on doing rapid release, or you feel that part of your strategy for your book launch needs to be multiple books launched in close succession. So you're going to kind of hoard your books. Right? These are all things you probably talked about on the show.
It is, but every once in a while we get a new author, so it's good to explain terms like rapid release.
Okay.
3 books ready to go, and you're going to launch them maybe once every 4 weeks or 3 weeks or something. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. So, the first year that I spoke, that was one of the biggest topics, and everyone left that conference like, I'm going to do rapid release because, Michael Anderle and Martha Carr had used it to just rocket up the charts. And a lot of folks that left that conference could write at those kind of speeds and knock those books out. But what they didn't have planned was the cash to launch those books. And there was an inherent flaw in their strategy, and that was, well, I'm going to launch book 1, and the money from book 1 is going to pay for the covers and editing on book 2 and 3. Right? And that will never happen, especially in certain genres where there's just an expectation of, like, if you're doing a rapid release and you're using that multiple book strategy, it's probably because in that genre there is an expectation by the customers to see multiple books, right? Because they know they can crush a book in a week. They're not going to go and because they've been disappointed. They've seen book 1 out from an author that they read and loved, and then book 2 didn't come out for a year. Right?
Yeah, a lot of readers, they'll wait until that third or even fourth book comes out before they even consider, starting book one. So I can see what you're saying. If your whole financial plan is based on just that first book, you're kind of already setting yourself up to fail.
Absolutely.
You don't even have the money yet for book 2 or book 3. And if you're rapid releasing and everyone's waiting for book 3 before they get book 1, the whole thing's just screwed.
Right. And here's where it gets even worse, because it becomes psychological, right? Because you set this expectation that I'm going to release these books. You've got all this stuff planned. And then even before you got started, you weren't in a position to succeed because of what you just said, right? And then because of that, you see that it's going to fail, and you become even more depressed because it's not going to work out, and you're broke ass. And so like it just spirals, right? So, and why did that happen? Is because there was an inherent brand promise you failed to make happen, right? If you put a book and it says book 1 on the front, it's because there's probably 2 or 3 or 20 coming after it. So the windup is, what do you do to make that successful? Well, you have a good plan. Now, it could be on a Post-it note, right? I'm not saying you got to break out Excel and start doing VLOOKUPs. I'm saying you just have a plan. You say, listen, I know my editor is going to cost this much for these books. My covers are going to be this much. And then understand your life situation, like where you're at. Can you afford to do that, right? And it probably means you may have to save and push things and reset your expectations for when launch is going to be. Because I know authors, they're sacrificing either their personal discretionary spending because they don't want to impact the family, like this is their thing, right? So just that, understand and set those expectations, and you're just going to have a better launch. So I think that's really the beginning thing for an indie author, is put that money into the book and understand how much money has to go into those books. And don't fret about, should I set up an LLC, or should I go get ISBN numbers, or all that other stuff. It's just none of that stuff. Like, you could give $500 to your state to set up a company. Are they going to promote your book? They don't give them the money.
Yeah, and also, that's a really good point. I mean, especially for, those of us who really have to watch our spending. There's not a whole lot of extra sluff fund to go into the editing and the covers. So your first covers, they don't have to be the $200, $300, $400, $500 covers. You can get those pre-mades from well-established pre-made artists and cover artists. And there's a lot of them through, all of the groups on the Facebook that you can get for, between sometimes $20, $25, $50, $75. If that's in your budget, work that in, find it. Maybe in a year or two, you might be able to afford, those custom covers. And then you have a secondary launch on a series that's already old. Now you're having secondary money coming in, because now
It's a good point. It's, it's kind of like buying a house. We were talking about house sales earlier. It's like you want to buy the house you can buy in the best neighborhood possible. It's the same kind of thing with covers. Like, you want to do the best cover you possibly can. It's unfortunate, but before somebody reads that first sentence of your epic book that is going to change the world, they're going to look at the cover, they're going to look at your reviews, and they're going to look at the page description, and then they're going to go to the look inside, right? Sometimes they won't do all three, but they're definitely the cover's going to be, that's the bait, right? Like,
people do judge books by the covers.
Yes.
That is people don't judge a book by its cover. That's just a nice thing that you're told as a child to not crush your dreams.
But the reason you can say that is because people do judge books by their cover.
They do, yes.
Here's a question, and your clients are all really successful, but for authors who are just starting out, how many sales can we expect to have, or is that even a question we can ask? I saw a number. It was that the average fiction book, self-published, makes $250 in its lifetime. That average. So, so there's a whole lot of books on the one side, and there's a whole lot of books that are making even less than that.
Right. So here's the research I've done, and this is kind of hard to pull these numbers. I've looked at things like author earnings and some of the K-lytic stuff, and so here, and I don't have this like compiled that I could show you that I've been. But this is kind of how I think about the market space. There's 80% of the books that never make more than $10,000 in their lifetime. Okay, because and if you want to get into a bigger world, there's all the people that want to write a book and never write a book. So we're not going to talk about that. Right? These are people that actually go to that point and write a book. And that's everything from, the local lawyer that puts something out to promote his business for estate planning, somebody that's thinking they're going to write the next, Tale of Two Cities, all of those people thrown in there, right? So that's 80%, right? The biggest part of the market, the books are not going to make more than $10,000 in a lifetime. So that aligns with what you kind of said, like $250 ever would follow that category, right? So now the 20% that's left, 80% of that, so like 16%, those people are going to make about $10,000 a year, right? And then it goes up from there, right? So there's only like 4% that are making, $50,000 and more. Like that you can think about as like being full-time writers. Now everyone's starting to think like, well, we're not even watching this show. This sucks. It's like, okay, that's the distribution.
Yeah.
I'm saying the distribution does not change. It's immutable. What's changed is the population we're applying that distribution to, right? There's more authors, right? So there's going to be more sucky authors. There's going to be more mediocre authors and more great authors, right? It's a bell curve. It's actually not I don't know what you call that guy, but the distribution is more weighted to the left. Right? Anyhow, the point is that your chance, there's more lottery tickets in the full-time writer bucket than there's ever been before, right? So I think that's the part to grasp onto, and I think that what I've observed from my clients who are doing really well is it took time, right? None of them had first book success. In fact, I think that might hurt you. Most of them didn't really start making money until book 7 on. And what's weird is it wasn't like book 7 was the one that made all the money. It was when book 7 came out, people started buying more of book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? And the whole thing lifted up.
Backlist.
Right?
The magic of the backlist.
It is, right? Because, and I think it gets to what we were talking about earlier, is in some of these genres, it takes time for people to find you. And when they do, and they say, oh, wow, this person has written 7 books and it's in something I like. I think I'll try one out. I'm not going to read this one they're advertising now because it's book 7. Go to book 1. Oh, I like it, right? So, I think that, kind of back to your question about, authors getting started. This is not an easy thing to do. This is not a get rich quick scheme. It is brutal work.
Put
it is not right. Like sitting in a chair 12 hours, writing 4,000 or 5,000 words a day is not good for the human body, right? These are like, but if you really enjoy crafting stories and building content, what I can tell you is that getting into print has never been easier, and you can make money faster. And the ways that you can take that intellectual property and go into other places is like it's never been before, right? I have a fiction pen name that I test a lot of my ideas out on. I just released audiobooks, and how did I get the money to release the first audiobook? I did a Kickstarter. Right?
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot about the Kickstarters and the definite success in them,
No, it's hard work. I mean, it's not like, hey, people just threw money at me. It's like a hellish book launch that lasts a month.
Yeah.
Right? But when I raised $5,000, okay? So that was worthwhile work. If you're an author and you're like, well, I want to get into audiobooks, but I don't have the money. Well, you can. You got to do the work to get that. And you can get the money up front, find an audience, and know that when your books finally do roll out on all these platforms, that's just gravy because the book's been paid for. And you're not in any kind of deal where you've sold away your soul just to try and get a book made. I know that was a huge digression off your question.
Yeah, you're good.
Well, it sounds like cash flow is a big key area for us to consider before we get into writing, and then definitely while we're setting up our business. Because you're going to spend your weeks or months or however long writing the book, but that's just book 1. We're saying that it might take till book 7 before you can go full time. So you don't want to accidentally create a business plan where you're expecting one book to fund the next book, because that might not be realistic.
Right. And I think that, so here's the thing about cash flow. That's the sole purpose of any business. Even if you're a nonprofit, you need to generate cash flow, right? Whether that's going out and raising money, begging for money for your charity, like Salvation Army, like they have to have a positive cash flow or it fails, right?
Gotta come from somewhere.
What's that?
It's got to come from somewhere.
Right. It's got to come from somewhere. So like creating sustainable positive cash flows is the essence of any business, right? Now, it's also the single main way that they value a business. So like people can figure out how much your business is worth really simply by figuring out how reliable and sustainable those cash flows are and say, well, I'm prepared to pay you this much for those future cash flows. It's net present value, right? So it is all about cash flow. So now how do you manage that as a CEO? Well, I'm going to put another spin on this. Certainly you need to know how to monitor your cash flow and manage that, but you have to be a bit schizophrenic when you're an author, right? So you can't always have your creative hat thinking about your world building and your story, right? You need to also be the CEO. Okay, that CEO needs to do some things, like the CEO needs to be making sure that this business is taking care of customers. It's taking care of the creative talent. But in any business, the CEO also has to think about the investor. And that's the part I think that most authors completely forget about. They forget about themselves as the investor in this business and what return their expectation is for what they invest in the business. Right? So the cool thing is when you're a small business, sometimes those things line up, right? Like taking care of the creative person with a retirement plan also helps you with getting a return for the investor, right? Because they're almost the same thing. But the idea being that where a lot of businesses tend to get jammed up is they don't think about what's the expectation of the investor with this business. Okay? And this is where, like, when I talk a lot about taxes, I know I think it was last week we had a tax guy on. So folks will be like, well, I just had my taxes done. I paid so much in taxes. It's like, well, here's how taxes work. You bring the guy a history book, and he tells you what the history book is going to cost. What I do with taxes and what we work on is we say, well, what are we trying to do? Okay. And based on what we're trying to do for that investor, we can pick all the different things that are in the tax code that are relevant to make it more tax efficient, so that at the end of this year, when you go to the tax guy, the story that's told to him is the story you want told to him. For example, are you trying to save money for retirement? Or are you trying to put kids through college? Right? Those things are kind of mutually exclusive, right? But there's things we can use in the tax code to make both of those work, right? Like, one of the things with being really tax efficient, a retirement plan, whether it's a SAP or a 401k, is the most powerful way that you can defer taxes.
Do tell.
So, well, I don't want to get too off the subject. I mean, I think we can talk about
real quick to tell.
So, I don't mean to not politicize anything, but like if the tax code was about just getting money to run the government, they would say it's, you owe us so much percentage of your income. It'd be like tithing, right? It's 10%, 50, whatever the number is. That's not how our tax codes are written. It's 80,000 pages, right? Why? It's a massive behavior modification system, right? It's designed to get you to do things or not do things. For example, the reason why they allow you to defer taxes on so much money going into your retirement is because they don't want you counting on the government for retirement, right? Like when they set up Social Security back in the 30s, right? Like the dirty secret was they knew the actuary tables. Nobody was supposed to live to be 65, right? Like that's the dirty joke, right? Like, yeah, we're going to pay for all your retirement after you're 65. Nobody lives that long, right? And then modern medicine comes along, and not only do we live longer, but we're getting healthier and all kinds of terrible stuff, right? So then they're like, oh, crap, what do we do now? Well, we'll get them to just invest in their own retirement by allowing them to defer those taxes. So at the end of any small business can set up either a SEP IRA, which is the self-employment pension IRA, or you could, if you have a business that's set up, so you can do a SEP as a sole proprietor. You don't even have to have a company. But if you have a company set up, you can also then do a 401k, and I can get into some nuances of that in a second. But you can put in, I think it's, right off the top of my head, it's like $54,000 can be deferred, right? So if you're feeling the pinch tax-wise at the end of the year, there's money that you can move in there. The other thing that happened this year, which has never been the case before, is there's a thing called the qualified business income deduction. Mm-hmm. Did you guys talk about that last week?
How withholding got doubled.
I don't think we got quite into that.
Okay, so this was part of the new tax code, and basically what happens is if you're if you're under a certain amount of income, and that includes what you would be making at your day job if you were doing this as a side deal. If you're married, it includes your spouse's income if you're filing jointly. But the windup is that as a sole proprietor, as an S corp, as an LLC, 20% of the business income you didn't have to pay taxes on. Okay, so that was called the qualified business income deduction. It's not as simple as I just explained it. There's all kinds of like flow charties, right? Like if you make this much, if you don't make this much, but like the windup is if you're, let's say you made $100,000 profit in your sole proprietorship as an author, $20,000 of that would be taxed. You wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. Pretty big deal, right? For a small business, that's a pretty big deal. Now, what's interesting to me is are you familiar with what a Roth IRA?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I set one up for the first time, and I'm glad I did. You got a saver's tax deduction thing, right?
Well, so the way things are done, so a regular IRA, I can put the money in today. I can put $1,000 in today. I don't have to pay taxes on the $1,000, and then it grows in there. And when it comes out, I pay taxes. So the bet on that one is that, well, I'm going to be older and I'll be paying less taxes then. So I get it to grow tax-free. And then when I take it out, I'll be at a lower tax bracket. Okay. A Roth, the bet is different. You're going to say, I'm going to pay the taxes today. Right? And the money that goes in there then grows tax-free. And when it comes out, it's tax-free. Okay. So who knows, what is the better bet? Play both horses, in my view, right? So here's the thing that gets interesting is if you have that Roth IRA, and again, I don't know the specific number, it kind of changes every year, but I think it's about $5,400. Let's say that your qualified business income deduction was $5,400, and you took that $5,400 and you put it into your Roth IRA. You just had profit from your business, come out tax-free, and put it into a situation where it's now off your writer bet table, growing tax-free. So the government isn't taking their cut. And when it comes out, it's tax-free, right? That's a really good thing for the author as the creator, taking care of their retirement, like good benefit. And for the investor, the other part of the schizophrenic personality, giving them a return, right? Like you don't have to be that smart when you start carving away the government's cut, right? Like it compounds a lot faster. So those are the kind of things that it doesn't really matter kind of what stage you're in. There's always some of these games you can, and games is the wrong word, but there's strategies to take to get the results you're trying to get, right? What you have to understand is what you personally are trying to do.
So again, it comes down to, and this is something that Michael Anderle, says a lot and has pretty much coined, I think, is what is your mountain? What are you climbing for? What are you reaching for? What is that end that meets all ends goal of yours? His started out $50,000 a year to retire in Cabo. So what do you need to do now to get to there? And everything you just said is like a part of, ways to get to what that end or top, I guess, mountain peak is.
Exactly. The example I use a lot, and I call it live in large or large assets. So let's say you're at a point in your career where you're an author and you're full-time. You have your business set up and you're like, hey, Joe, I want to go travel the world and write on every beach on every continent. Well, we can do that, all right? And you can run that through your business in such a way that it's very tax efficient, right? That you feel like you're living a larger life because a lot of it's on pre-tax dollars, right? And I know that Chris talked a little bit about that last week, right? So you can do that, and that's great. But you can't come back and say, that was fun for the last year, but now I want to buy a house. Like, well, okay, you got a problem. Because for us to be structured for you to buy a large asset like a house, really what we need to do is take that income that you're making as an author and showing it on a W-2, right? So that you can go into a lender and show them the appropriate number to get the loan for the type of house you're planning on buying, right? Because of the way that things worked with the crash in 2008, you need probably about 18 months of that for it to work well. Understanding that, we can structure it either way, right? But then you, as the CEO, you get to make that decision, right? Like the trade-off, why you're doing it. You're not having any surprises. That makes sense?
It does.
Yeah, so if you've got a plan ahead for what your life looks like in the next 5 years and you think you need a financial plan, then it sounds like it would be really wise to find a financial expert such as yourself to really talk things over and come up with a plan together. Yeah,
and for a lot of authors and probably a lot of the folks that are watching this, it's about how do I execute the phase in my life where I go full time, right? The people that I know that have done it really well and with a lot less heartburn, it's the ones that have thought it through and have had a plan and have thought about what kind of impact that's going to have on their family, right? And the sooner you start to do that, the better, because a lot of folks, it's like they're kind of planning that, and then boom, something happens in their life, and they find out they're now unemployed, right? And to be in a position to be like, all right, I kind of have this plan. I can now adjust it and really get after this writing. Just is a lot easier than like losing time. Like, do I look for another job? Do I not? Should I do it's not just about like having a plan and sticking to it. It's like having a plan, and when life hits that plan, understanding how you can adjust off that plan to get as close to those results as you can. And I think that's probably, it's all cool to talk about authors that are buying houses and that, but more folks are worried about like, hey, can I do a launch? Then it's, when is it time for me to go tell my boss what I really think of this job?
Yes, yeah, and health insurance. And we'll get to all those questions in a moment, but first, Chaney has an epic sponsor read.
Yes, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try and be epic. So I just want to say this one point based off of what he was saying. I'm definitely also hearing, as an author, definitely thinking of this as a small business. You've got to look at what's happening, behind the boring doors. The most important things. I mean, the writing, the launching, that's all the fun stuff. But how do you get there? And you need to remain flexible. You can't think like I'm doing X, Y, Z, and that's exactly what it's going to be. And then Y completely falls apart, and then you have a meltdown. You can't allow yourself to have a meltdown. You got to, okay, so Y didn't happen. I'm going to have to beeline to get to Z. So stay flexible. Anyway, stay frosty, folks. Show sponsor, Renegade Empire, an intergalactic space opera adventure. Book 10 by J.N. Chaney? Chaney? Chaney. Okay, Chaney. Who are the Celestials? Captain Jace Hughes is about to embark on a crusade against the greatest enemy any human has ever faced. The Celestials are unrivaled in their brutality, technology, and strength, but the former captain of the Renegade Star will not be swayed. With new allies, a joint armada, and a healthy dose of determination, Jace must launch a campaign of exploration through the largest slip tunnel in the known galaxy. With no knowledge of what awaits him, he must rally his people and learn all that he can about this unknown enemy. But what terrible secrets await the crew on the other side, tucked quietly in the void so far from home? Experience the continuation of this sprawling galactic tale in the 10th entry in the Renegade Star series. Click now and be epic.
Yay. Woohoo. Good job.
I gotta go read that. Sorry, bye guys.
No, we still have 18 more minutes of your time. Please. We have lots of questions.
All right.
One from John Evans. He asks, are there any bookkeeping or accounting software programs that are international, he's from England, and worthwhile for a small business, or should we stick with Excel spreadsheets?
Okay, so I'm not real familiar with what would be available in his market. I know that QuickBooks Online they do have like EU, UK versions, but there's a cost with that. If you're in a position where you can afford something like that, and you've got the transactions, I recommend doing it because it's just going to help you manage your business better. In the United States, there is an online software called Wave, and it's free. And if you have a business bank account, which everyone should be running their business out of a business bank account, super, super important. You can then hook that up, and it puts together your. You have to go in there and tell what the different expenses are but it'll categorize it and make your income statement and balance sheet that you can then go over and give to your accountant or use for doing your taxes for your Schedule C.
Wave, you said?
Wave, yeah. And it's free. Here's what's in it for them. The game they're playing is when you do finally start making money and you're going to pay yourself a salary, they want to be your payroll service. And then they charge you.
And at that point, now they're making money.
Now they make money, yeah. So it's like that's their deal is that they have a pretty good payroll system, and it's like, oh, my stuff is here, it integrates. I'll just pay them the $60 a month now.
So kind of like how the what's it called? I have it right here. The thing on the internet. What is it? The book report. It's free up until you make $1,000, and now they're like, okay, you made your first grand. Now it's time to start paying us to keep giving you all these delicious things.
Yeah. And I touched on it. One of the beginner author thing before you set up an LLC, before you do anything, if you're running as a sole proprietor, you should have a separate account that you're doing all your business out of, and that when you're taking money out for your personal stuff, it comes out and goes into your other account.
And then
So a couple things. One is it's just going to be easier for you to track your records. Because in today's electronic stuff is like you could just download that from whatever regular bank you're with and quickly figure out if your income statement. You can either use this software or even if you did it in Excel. I mean, all your information is there, right? Second thing is that when you commingle funds, it becomes something that could potentially pierce the corporate veil. Okay? And this is when we talk about companies. So I'm going to get let me talk about LLCs or companies for a second. When you set up a company, what a company does is it provides you limited liability protection. So if you and I are partners in a business and we are running our business and we buy a bunch of inventory and go out of business, the guys that gave us credit to buy that inventory can't come after you and I for money. Right? They can go after the assets of the business, but that's it. Okay? Now, if we were to then be moving money in and out of that business account, mushing it around with our stuff, and it becomes really unclear as to what's your money, what's my money, and what's the business's money, that's a real obvious thing for that bankruptcy court to say, well, listen, this really wasn't a separate deal. And some of those assets that are in your account probably belong to the business. So we're just going to claw those back.
Yeah.
And that happens more often than you would think in bankruptcies, is because people are like, well, I just need a little money, and they write this out of the account, and they're not being very clear in their records. Right? So setting up that discipline right from the beginning is one of those good business habits that makes it just a lot smoother, because then when you are ready to set up a company, it's real easy to go into the bank and say, hey, I want to take this account and have it turned into a bank account for this new company I set up. And they close the one and open up the other. It's really simple. But a lot of folks don't do that. And then they're wondering at the end of the year why it's so hard to keep track of their records when everything's just a big slop pile.
Yeah, so setting up a separate bank account, that definitely will make the records more clear, for what's coming in, what's going out. And then the LLC for authors in particular, would you recommend setting up an LLC, or is that one of those optional things? Or
so let me kind of walk you through that. And we're going to start out back with being a sole proprietor and some things to do. Because again, what are my indicators? I want you to put your money into your product, not into setting up a business. So in the beginning, setting up as a sole proprietor, this is all stuff you can do on your Schedule C, right? Tax term wise. But what I would suggest that you do is go and get an employment identification number issued. If you're not familiar with that, it's kind of like a business social security number. And you can go have that done as a sole proprietor. So you haven't set up anything legally. You're just like, I'm running my business. I'm Lauren. I'm running my business. Go get an EIN. It's free. Go to irs.gov and do that. Well, why would you want to do that? Well, because you can use that EIN number when you're filling out all these W-9s, when you're going to get that business bank account, right? You're doing all that stuff. And it's one more situation where you're not putting your personal social security number out into the world to be ripped off. Right?
So I do have a quick question, not to like totally throw you off. So the doing business as, or the DBA, how is that different from like the EIN, and does it have any other value or whatnot to kind of like where you're going with?
So you didn't really knock me off. It's
okay.
It's actually a really good segue. So, so doing business as, what doing business as is you're basically officially saying that you're going to be operating your business under a different name. So you're separating your personal identity from this business identity. And I think it's kind of one of these things that's a little antiquated. It's more of kind of a turn of the past century kind of concept of, and when you look at what you have to do to get set up as a DBA, and the cost associated in the time, it's probably worth more to go that step and set up an LLC, right? Well, why would you do that? Well, with the DBA, yeah, now now you're Dragon Quest Publishing or whatever it's going to be. But if you go do something stupid and get sued, your personal assets are still at risk.
Because it's tied to your social security number.
Well, no, because it's a DBA. It's still your sole proprietor. It's just you put a mask on. Not a very good one. It's kind of cardboardy and staples.
It's a Scooby-Doo mask.
A Scooby-Doo mask, yeah. Even with that EIN number, which is giving you probably more protection, it's still right. So like you have to look at what your local deal is. So like where I'm in Illinois, to set up a DBA, I've got to go to the county. I've got to pay him like $50. I got to go run an ad in the newspaper, which is like, that's too hard, right? So I would just go set up an LLC, which does two things, right? It's going to create a completely separate identity, and it's going to provide me that limited asset protection, right? It's a different, all the way to the Supreme Court, it's been proven that a company is like a human being, except it can live forever. Right? It's different. It's not you. So that, when I talk to people, it's like, well, you got to think about like where you're at cash flow wise, what kind of money you need to be investing in your books. If you're doing $10,000 a year, right? And if you remember, that's that number we talked about earlier. That's cleared you from the other 80%. We know that you're in the 20%. You're probably going to go up. That's probably a good point to spend money on setting up a company. And depending on what state you're in, the costs vary. It's something you can do yourself. It's something I have courses on to show people how to do. But it's, on average, it's about $350 to set up a company.
So if you do have a DBA, can you transfer that into an EIN? Can you cancel it, or like how does that fit into there? Like if you realize, oh, I didn't realize that there was this whole other thing, but I have this DBA, can you then go back and fix it?
Yeah. So what you would do is you would go and set up a company. So what state are you in?
Idaho.
So you would go to the Idaho Secretary of State, and this is something you can do from the comfort of your home, right? You can just do it online and set up that LLC. You could use the same name, right? Because that wasn't a company, right? It has to be a unique name. Then you would pay to get that set up, and then once you have that set up, you would get it's a new EIN number, right? And then you would go and you would transfer that bank account over to the business, and you basically have your company set up. Right? Now, that year you do that, you're living two worlds, right? Some of your income is going to be coming on your Schedule C as the DBA on that EIN number, and then part of the year would be through the company. Now, depending on where you want to go with this, the next thing is we talk about S corps usually, what that is all about.
Well, quick question before we move on to S corps. So, like with the author setting up an LLC, is it just like their author name, or are they turning themselves into a small press? They're the only author in their press, or?
Yeah. So I would suggest keeping it a simple name. You can use your own name. Most authors that I know that are doing it, they're kind of have some kind of cool or cute name, publishing LLC. And yeah, they're the only guys that are doing publishing on that through that company. And the state doesn't care what as long as what you're doing is conducting legal business, they don't get into the minutia of what you're doing. And they may ask to try and classify it for like those census kind of things. Mm-hmm. But again, it's like you're just put in publishing and off you go. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Although, follow-up question. Okay, so Tilly and I were both editors and authors.
Same business.
You make just one?
No, one. Just throw it on one.
So one bank account for the business. You have your personal bank account. All the editing, all the authoring, that's with this one. I want to go have snow cones. That's on that one.
Exactly.
And then health insurance was another question that came up from our Facebook group. They really wanted to know. So leaving my full-time job, health insurance is a big concern for people.
It's a huge, huge issue. So unfortunately, health insurance is a real rough thing for all self-employed people. Right? So what a lot of folks don't understand if they're working at a company and they're like, well, my company does all this stuff for healthcare. Their company doesn't get a better deal. Their company's getting screwed by the insurance company just like everybody else. They're just paying a big portion of that for you. Right? So that's coming out of the company's profits. And I know this from when I had businesses. We had 30-something employees. They were never the healthcare they were not that happy with because we were constantly getting the rates increased. We could cover what we could. Their deductibles were going up. Like, you know the story, right? So now you're on your own, right? Now you're self-employed. Now the deal is, the way it works, it's kind of wonky with insurance, but your insurance premiums are deductible. Okay? But when you set up the way I typically set up companies where you would set up an LLC and then have it treated like an S Corp, you're better to just pay your premium out of your after-tax income, and that'll be deducted on your personal return. Otherwise, it gets convoluted because you have to claim it as income, pay income tax on it, then deduct it, and get the return. So the best thing to do is just say, your eyes are kind of rolling on that one, but
no, I'm reading. Sorry,
it's just it's just one of these things. It's like typical IRS, and the windup is just you're going to have to pay your own health insurance, and you're going to most likely end up in the health insurance Obamacare, the health marketplace. Yeah, right. Now, one thing is you may qualify for some pretty heavy subsidies, even as a business owner, because you're doing it on your personal return, and your business isn't making as much money. Right. So a couple kind of anecdotal things around that. Right? Like I know I've had authors that are kind of scaling up their business, and they were able to get some pretty heavy subsidies. Was the way they had structured their business. I also have authors that are making a boatload of money, and because of health concerns that they have for themselves or their spouses, can't leave their day job. And that's just jacked up. Right? Like to think that we're in this country that somebody can't go do not only what they want to do and love to do and have been successful at doing it, but because they're so worried about having crappy insurance over in this other system, they don't want to go do it.
Wow. Double-edged sword.
I don't know if that. I always hate talking about that one because I don't have any really good news.
Yeah, you want to have something good.
I don't have any magic tricks I can do for that one.
Right.
That magic trick.
It still sucks.
Yeah. That magic trick, the white lion eats the guy.
That's so good to know. What other questions did we have? S Corp.
Yeah.
How about that?
So, when you set up your company, when you set up an LLC from a tax perspective is just like a sole proprietorship. Okay, so it can become, Chris mentioned in his things, it can be a disregarded entity. It's like it doesn't even exist for tax purposes. It's there for legal liability purposes, but for tax purposes, it doesn't exist. Okay. You can also set up a corporation. Okay. A corporation, from a tax perspective, is treated completely different. Okay. It has its own tax rate. Right. And what sucks about it, if you set up as a corporation, is that the company would pay taxes on its profits, and then the money you would take out from there would then be taxed a second time at your income tax rate. Okay, double taxation. But now there's a thing called the S Corp, which is an IRS ruling. They elect to do this to your company. And you can do it with either a corporation or an LLC. You fill out some paperwork. I think it's the 2255 form. You just can look it up. You get your company elected to be treated as an S Corp, and now it's treated completely different. As far as the IRS is concerned, it's not an LLC, it's not a C Corp, it's an S Corp. And what's cool about that is, one, now we can pay you on a W-2, which you cannot do as a sole proprietor or in an LLC. Okay? So why is that important? Well, if you remember, we talked about that buying the house thing. When you can show income on a W-2, society just processes it easier. You can go buy a car and get a super good loan, right? You can make twice as much money and say I'm self-employed, and the car dealer's like, this sucks, right? There's extra paperwork for him. Opposed to W-2, it's just kind of magical. Same with the loan, right? So that's one part of it. It just makes your life as a self-employed person a little easier. The other thing is now S Corps, the money that comes out as a dividend, okay, isn't taxed with self-employment tax. Okay, so let's go through some examples. Let's say you made $100,000, and it was a sole proprietor. You would pay your income tax and your self-employment tax on the full $100,000. Right? If you created an LLC, nothing's changed. $100,000, you pay the income tax on that, you pay the self-employment tax on that. We set up as an S Corp, and we take a portion of that $100,000, and we put that through on your W-2. Let's say it's somewhere between 50 and 80% of what the business makes. That has payroll tax, which is equivalent to self-employment tax, and your withholdings out of it. But the dividends that you take out, that other 50 to 20% that comes out, you only pay income tax on. You save 15.8% in self-employment tax.
Interesting.
Right? So that becomes where you start to use business tools, right, as a CEO, to make it easier to be more profitable, right? We're trying to take care of how we get more cash flow, how we are more profitable, how we get more back to our investor. But if we don't give it to Uncle Sam, then we can invest it more wisely in our own business to grow that business.
That sounds really helpful for when we eventually get further down the writer's journey.
Yes.
Yeah, so for those
the big books.
I was gonna say, for those like just starting out, like me and Lauren, you know, the S Corp, the LLCs, probably not currently in our line of path, but what can we do? We can open up a separate bank account.
Yep.
And start knowing exactly what we're spending, what we're making. You can open up an Excel spreadsheet and know what products you're purchasing for, like covers, editing, software, hardware, things like that. Do your taxes as the sole proprietor. And then once you start reaching those higher numbers, then that's getting into, okay, now I really need to start thinking, okay, eventually I'm going to retire. Eventually I want to buy my own house. I want to buy my own car. And that's when you're like, okay, LLC time. Let's roll it into the S Corp. Let's see what we can do about not giving 100% to the government. You know?
Absolutely. And that's really it is, and like back when you think about things like that, like when you go to set up a business bank account, if you do a little extra research, you'll see there's a lot of tools that are probably included that will help you to maybe not do a full-blown income statement and balance sheet like an accounting thing, but it's going to have reporting there that makes it super easy for you to see what your expenses are, right? And, remember this about accounting. All this wushu and all this stuff, it all boils down to your bank account, right? It's all down to cash and your bank account. So if that's not being taken care of, everything else is messed up.
You gotta know what's going in,
Yep.
what's coming out, and where that coming out is going.
And the thing about authors are, even when you're making a ton of money, you're still going to be running your business on what's called the cash basis, right? Which means you're going to be accounting for what's happening in your business when cash goes in and out versus accrual, which is like we're trying to, we'll account for sales in the month that we sell the product, even though we might not get the cash for 60 days. Right? So that's a different accounting method. Right? But authors are always going to run on the cash basis because of the way our businesses work, and that has to do with being this huge waiting time that we have for our cash, right? And we didn't really even talk about that and how that's something that's really an author issue, in the fact that once you're publishing, you're going to wait 60 days for your money, right? And then you talk about that launch trough. We go back to the basics of that. And whatever you spend on your book covers, that's the depth of that trough, right? The duration is, okay, if it takes you 3 months to get your books written, you already paid for your covers, and then 2 months to get your money from Amazon, that's 5 months.
Yeah.
Whatever you're going to spend, let's say it's $1,000. Can you live without $1,000 for 5 months? There's been times in my life when that's not been possible.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it was a big deal. Like somebody was not eating. Right? So, but I'm not saying that to discourage anybody. Right? I'm all for making the big bet but like be less dumb about it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Back to that principle.
Yeah, that kind of goes into another topic we want to talk about, but it's kind of a big topic. I think we might have to get you back on the show just to talk about direct sales systems in order to avoid having to wait 60 days to get your money for books. You can sell directly to our readers. That would make you get the money right away. Yeah,
well, that is a big topic. What I would say is this. I actually have that book you mentioned is free. So you can actually, and it's on all platforms. It's wide. And it's basically a lead into how I do direct sales. It's basically kind of a lead magnet into the book that I sell on my website. And I would say this is, go take a look at that. It gives authors a way to start selling direct right off the bat that is within terms of service, if you're in KU. And, the underlying principle is that you have fans that love what they read, but they're not your customers. They're Amazon's customers. They don't become your customers until you transact with them and they spend money. Once you're your customer, now your relationship has changed. Okay? And the best place that you can do direct sales, you don't have to do anything fancy, it's in your mailing list. You can do it with PayPal and BookFunnel. Find out who on your list is prepared to give you money today.
So set up a mailing list. That's one more reason, and a really great reason, to set up an email mailing list, and then be interactive with your fans on that and use that to sell directly to your audience. And then how would you be delivering the books?
Have you talked to Damon at BookFunnel? Or?
We have not.
Okay, you got to get...
BookFunnel we keep on hearing about.
You got to get Damon on. First off, he's just a hoot. He's a fun guy. And BookFunnel, if you're not familiar with it, it's a tool for delivering books. The main tool, mainly used for when you're trying to build your list. Okay, So, I've got it as a reader magnet. I'm doing newsletter swaps. I send out, how do I deliver that book? He's got a really simple way of doing it where you can actually get on promotions through this site. But the big thing is it delivers the book. And the best thing about it is if they can't get it loaded on their Kindle or whatever, he handles it. They don't call you. It's like right in the email they send out, call here. And they literally have like every known device in their office to figure out what's going on. So, but the other thing he's done, and sometimes I think he and I feel like we're yelling in the wilderness about this, is he has it set up that you can connect it to your PayPal account or connect it to WooCommerce. He's got a couple other things, Shopify, a few others. But so that when somebody, like, think about this, you put a PayPal link to say, buy my book for $1. Okay? When they click on that link, they go to the PayPal, they do the transaction, PayPal calls up Damien and says, send him the book. And they get the link and they download the book. And when you do that, your cost to do that is 30 cents plus 2.6%. You make 65% on a dollar book. 65%, nice. Right? But most importantly, what you've done is you found people that want to buy from you direct. These are going to be your super fans. And you know what? They want to buy from you. They don't want to give their money to Amazon.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, if they're your fans, they would like to interact directly with you if they possibly can.
Absolutely. So go ahead.
I was going to say, this probably is something that people can look up, but I know people like to have the question asked and be answered. So for those that are in KU, is Book Funnel a thing that is still available to them? Or would you need, for those that are in the Kindle, the KU, the Kindle Unlimited, they're all in, as people say, with Amazon. Yes. Is Book Funnel still a thing that's available for them to do?
So you don't want to violate terms of service. If your book is in KU, you can't be doing book swaps with it, and you can't be selling it elsewhere. But what you can do is you can have a different type of launch strategy, right? The people, and here's this. I get into this in the books, right? The people that are in Kindle Unlimited, you might be able to move some of them out, but most of them are never going to be your customer because the value proposition to them is the subscription service of Kindle Unlimited. Okay? That's a value prop. What you do is you say, that's great. I'm going to take care of you people, but guess what? You get to wait. If you want to read my book, I'm going to launch it 2 months before it's in KU in my newsletter. Okay? So what can I do? Well, you can launch it earlier, right? You can put additional material in it, like give them a special bonus chapter that other people don't get on other platforms. But make it so that your audience understands that your newsletter is the place for the best, most awesome deals. Okay? That's going to increase your engagement. People are going to want to read your newsletter because there's something different in it, right? And they're going to be able to transact. Right? You can do it. You get a picture of your book cover. You go into PayPal. You create a buy button, and you use the hyperlink for that in your newsletter. You're buying right from you. It's not they're not buying directly from the newsletter. Flips into PayPal and then does the transaction. But get my point is a very smooth transaction. The book gets delivered seamlessly. You don't have to be bothered with it. And you're collecting all that information in Book Funnel. And then, whatever your time window is, let's say it's a month later, you drop it into KU, right? And you can do that in sync with a pre-order on Amazon, right? You can be doing your pre-sales in your newsletter and your pre-sales on Amazon at the same time. It's when you click to put the book into KU. Just do it after it comes out of pre-sale. And you never violate terms.
Yeah, and then you'd have people who have already read your book, and if they feel so inclined, they could leave you a review right off the bat.
There you go.
Absolutely.
First launching.
actually, what it is you're creating a way to give yourself, the way I talk about it is an advance as a writer. Like your audience is going to advance you the money. Because here's the other thing is you're doing it within your newsletter. So if how you put the verbiage will determine the expectations, right? Like when you pre-sell on Amazon, you've got a hard deadline that you don't want to mess with. But people like that because it keeps them honest with getting the book out. But there's no reason why with pre-selling in your newsletter, you say, listen, my book's coming out this year. It's on sale. I'm going to have it out. I'll tell you when. Right? Some people will buy, some people won't. But if you get where it's like, okay, they know that you're going to deliver in the next, 6 weeks. There are people that are going to want to buy that because of the value proposition you created, right? You're saying, you buy it, pre-order on my deal, you're going to get it before all these other people. And I'm going to give you a bonus chapter that nobody else gets. That's what I do with my fiction company. And it works great. And the best deal, I don't make a lot of money off of them. They're my best fans. I want them to have the best deal. But to your point, they write reviews. And a lot of times they buy the book on Amazon again.
It's true. Yeah, because there's a lot of people that they want that paperback,
Yeah.
and then if you have the means to do the audio, there's that whisper sync. So they buy the paperback and they're like, ooh, whisper sync, I'm gonna get that. And and then if you do get to the point where you have it in KU, people are purchasing it on, or I guess downloading it on KU, and it's like, hey, but you can get the paperback for 99 cents too if you want. Oh, well, okay.
Yeah, I think that you just have to think about these audiences separately and understand what the value proposition is. And it's, there are people that buy that, KU is what's important to them because they get such big value out of it because they're such voracious readers. Can some of those people become my fans? Yes. Are there people that are my fans and get my newsletter that want to buy from my newsletter? Yes. Are there some that they're just lazy and they're going to wait till the book comes out because it loads really easy on their Kindle? Yeah. So I can take care of them all.
Yeah.
Right. Now, my fiction pen name, the stuff ends up in KU, so that's kind of the process I follow. But it, the biggest objection I hear to this all the time is it's going to affect my rank.
Affect your what?
My rank.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I can't really talk to that point because the authors that I think are doing that well, rank really doesn't matter to them anymore. If you're kind of scaling your way up, yeah, it probably does. But my philosophy is just different. Like rank isn't as important as customer relationship.
Yeah. It sounds like this is a really good strategy for thinking through the different kinds of customers you have and how best to service each of the different kinds with an actual strategy in place for a month or 2 months of whatever it takes to make your launch happen.
Yeah, I mean, what I think authors really suffer from, one, they're like, well, I'm kind of an imposter and I'm like not really famous, and like you don't know, like there could be somebody that really loves reading your books that owns a private jet. All right, so like their ability to pay for a product, like they may be willing to pay to spend an afternoon with you and pay $1,000 to do that. And they don't care because they're going to fly there on their private jet, right? Like you don't know that until you test those things, until you try it out, right? So you can't think small with this. You have to think about where your intellectual property can go because it's way bigger than just books.
Yeah. Games, Netflix series, Amazon series, who knows?
Oh, yeah.
Books, audio, all the yeah.
I mean, think about what's going on with audio right now and the value that's being created with audio. And are some book sales being cannibalized? Yeah, there's going to be some. But really, it's bringing you a whole new audience of people that weren't reading. We're never going to read, but they can squeeze in listening to your book over a month.
I've met a lot of fans who do both, who buy both the audio and the Kindle book, or even the paperback. Like, you know.
Yeah, and I think there's that, right? And I know that I've done it. I was like, I was gonna listen to books, and now that I'm doing it, it's like I have to say this, that with my audiobook, I think the narrator I got brings a whole nother layer to this. Like, she's amazing, and she does stuff with voices that's just crazy, and makes my books better, way better. So
and that's for your pending books, right?
Yeah, my pending. Yeah. So it's kind of my crash test dummy for a lot of my business stuff.
And then the direct sales book, which you can get for free, is Direct Sales Unleashed: Why Your Fans Want to Buy Direct and How to Do It. And I saw that on Amazon, and you said it's also wide. So
yeah, and you can go, if you go to joesolari.com, there you can get it direct there. Download it there. You can see some of the stuff I'm doing. And it walks people through like different strategies for how you might want to do direct sales. It's more than just the PayPal thing, but I think that PayPal concept is something that anybody can do. And most people already have the tools. They don't know that they have them. And I would definitely do that in your mailing list before you think about culling your mailing list.
okay.
All right. Yeah, so we're 20 minutes over, which is awesome because there always seems to be way more that we need to talk about than what we can stuff into that hour. So going over, no worries.
Okay, sorry, but I tend to digress.
No, these were big topics that were like mountains that I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to climb, but now I feel like I can understand them and I know where I'm going. Thank you very much for coming on and sharing this.
It's great. And any of this stuff, not only if you guys want to talk about it again, if you do go to my website, there's spots where you can sign up with time with me to talk, right? Like, it doesn't cost you anything. It's just like, if you got questions, I'm happy to answer them. And because a lot of this is like in the early stages, people are fretting about these ideas. And if we can just get them like off the ledge about, like, you don't have to worry about setting up an LLC in the early stages. Go write a book, right? You're not a business yet because you don't have a product. Go make a product, right? Let's find out if your product sucks. I can't help you now.
Exactly.
So that's there too for people. Just don't be afraid. I'm totally approachable, and I can answer some of these questions. I know some of this stuff may be personal they want to get into, that I can give them specific
answers. Where can people find you to have this one-on-one time?
So I've actually got two websites in the midst of pulling things together. So there's joesolari.com, joesolari.com, which has got those books, and there's a spot there to sign up. I also got like a thing called the Business of Writing cheat sheet. It kind of has the bullet points of like what to do at what levels. I also have a site called Indie Author Alchemy, which has courses. One course is called Sole Proprietor Simplified, which is just that, like, all the stuff you need to know about being a sole proprietor. It's like 25% about taxes and what you need to do with DBA and that kind of stuff. And the rest is like getting your act together and organized. And then the other one is the BizOps Bootcamp, which is when you're ready for that, to like, okay, I'm going to set up my company. We handhold you through that process and help you get it set up. And that's Indie Author.
Very good.
Exactly what I need.
Yeah. So that's Indie Author Alchemy. Now, you can go there and you can sign up for that stuff. And, there's certain things that are kind of time-based, but we help you through it when you're kind of off schedule. IRS likes you to do things kind of at the beginning or the end of the year.
I'm noticing that. It's like, yeah, you want to do this at like this time of the year so that you can get this done. Don't do it here.
Yeah.
This is not the way to do that.
Yeah. And they, like, you do it, it's like, it's worse than being ignored. Like, it's like extra work, and then they tell you no.
All right. So I'm going to close it out to everyone. Thank you so much for coming on, Joe.
This has been a blast.
We'll definitely have to have you on again because I can tell there's so much more that we wanted to talk about, need to talk about, that we as authors and what did he call us? Creative entrepreneurs need to be comfortable with talking about and need to be being okay with. So to everyone in the live chat, thanks for hanging out with us. Let us know what you thought about the show in the comments and show your support with the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you always know when we've got more shows going on and we know that you're listening. So for Lauren Moore, I'm Kaylin Williams. Thank you for joining us on your writer's journey. We'll see you next time to talk about some reading, writing, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium's The Writer's Journey. Good night, you guys.
Thanks. Good night.